Hello, everyone. My name is Elisha and Caster. I will be your host tonight. Welcome to the Metaphysical Mindset. Tonight is very special as I am having my husband, Steven Caster, on. Thank you, Steven, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, babe.
And we're just going to talk a little bit about what it's like. Well, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. But what I want to start off talking about is what it's like to be married to someone that is having a spiritual awakening. Um, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that's been like for Stephen, what that was like for me, a little bit about the process. And we're just going to kind of get into some of those details. It's really interesting because as a counselor and as a spiritual life coach, and in teaching classes, you run into this a lot. And I know we've talked to a few couples that are friends of ours that kind of have to go through this process of understanding what their spouse or loved one is going through so that they can support them. But what's interesting is that they don't always feel as though they need to have a spiritual awakening.
Mhm.
I feel like for me, it was very abrupt. It was a life-changing experience that had some levels to it. And I feel like you just slowly moved into an awareness that was so much more calm.
Yeah. Well, it's probably because that's how I am most of the time, is
Yeah.
very calm. And even though I wasn't like trying to go through a spiritual awakening, and I don't know if like that's the right way to say it, like trying to go through it, because I don't think people try to do that. I think it just naturally happens. So it depends on maybe um, like what's happening in their life to make it happen so abruptly or not. And so even though I haven't gone through like a spiritual awakening, I feel like, you're saying I've gone through it like at a slower pace. It's just because I'm kind of hanging on to whatever it is you're going through. You know what I mean? And you're kind of not dragging me through it, but you're going through it and I can see what's going on. And so for me, I like pick up bits and pieces along the way. Um, and so I think that's what's kind of bringing me through this, but it's because I'm open to it. I'm open to you changing and I'm not afraid of that. And so I think a lot of times in relationships where they say if you're not growing or changing together, you grow apart.
Yeah.
And so I'm just open to the change, obviously because I love you and I love the changes that you have been going through. And I'm open to that. But
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, I'm open to a lot of things, a lot of different opinions and thought processes. I try to not close myself off on that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think the biggest difference that I notice in my practice is when people start to have these spiritual experiences, they start to awaken to their intuition or they start to feel spirit around them, whether it's loved ones or guides or even neighbors that have passed away. And they start to go through these experiences where they're so undeniable and they're so curious about them that they know once they cross that line into exploration, like curiosity just gets them. They know that there's no coming back. And there's a beauty to this connection because we do become kinder and more compassionate, and we sort of elevate our vibration into a new reality. And that a lot of times means not having some of the things in common with friends that we've had in common with, even for years, decades, even. Some people even have this experience in their relationships. So
Mhm.
their loved ones don't know how to deal with this new sense of self. And so it becomes difficult. Some of the habits fall away and
Mm.
some of those friends fall away. And I know that it's been a slow looking back now. It was probably starting when I met you. Really, I was starting to kind of, I guess I've always been curious.
Yeah.
And I've always been explorative and I've always loved to research um, intuitive aspects of our being and consciousness. Um, but maybe speak on that a little bit. So, has there been times when it was difficult to kind of follow me down a path and allow me to step into the unknown? Were you ever worried about what that would do for
I
us?
don't know that I don't know that worried is the right word. I was never really worried. Um, and even like watching you explore things that are like totally outside of my realm, as far as talking to spirit and getting up on a stage to, give readings and all those sorts of things. Um, you know, it's I've seen it done through other people. And so it wasn't entirely like a new concept. I mean, it was weird that you were starting to do that, just because it wasn't something that I knew you could do, or I don't even think you knew you could do that. But you know, for me, like it comes down to just our relationship has been built on trust and love. And so, I get that question a lot as far as how do you know that Elisha's not like, BSing you, or however you put that, Um,
Or to clients when I used to do readings, do you mean?
yeah, well, like people would ask me, like, how, do you believe that Elisha can do that? You know? And so thinking about just our relationship of me trusting you and believing you, like if I didn't believe in you fully and I didn't believe that, then yeah, then I would then that's not the relationship that I would ever want to be in,
Yeah.
And so I never and I guess like a lot of times your thoughts would be validated, where you would have your symbols and you would say, well, this for me, this symbol means this, and it would resonate with somebody. And so like I get to see the proof as we were going along, but I trusted you anyways, and I think just all the conversations that we have where um where you start talking about all of your symbols when just you and I are around, and I can kind of start to see your thought process on, like with your mother, when your breast starts to tingle, and then that means female for you. And then this is a side conversation that we're having. And then all of a sudden you get up on stage and then you start to go through those and you start to feel that. And then, that's just you validating for that person, but also me like, oh yeah, she did say that. And there it is. And that person just validated it. And so, I don't know if I answered the question. I feel like
Well,
I'm babbling.
through me, I think you got to become a believer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, truly, because I wasn't really around anybody like that. Now I've definitely, as you know, have seen people get up on stage where I'm like, that person is full of shit, you know, but,
Yeah.
but, but maybe they're not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I just don't know them enough. I don't have any sort of background or, I haven't built up any rapport or trust with that person. And so it seems like they're just kind of
Yeah.
making stuff up. Whereas with you, again, you know, we've had hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours now of conversations, and so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think healthy skepticism is good. You've always had that. So have I. You more so though. And there are some mediums that, because we've seen a lot
Yeah.
of mediums over the years. And there were a lot of mediums that they were just very general. They could have been talking to anyone. Their symbols were just so vague
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
even if they were,
Did your grandma like to make apple pies?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah. Or do you have a father in spirit or a grandfather?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
always a tricky one too.
Yeah.
If they don't follow that up with validation. And it's a hard thing to do. I don't want to discredit and say anyone that is giving vague messages is inaccurate. It's just hard to make a believer
Yeah.
out of someone when that's the case.
Yeah. But like, so thinking about like you going through the spiritual awakening
Yeah.
and me just kind of being there from the outside looking in, um, I think that there really is especially kind of where we're at in the world today, like with people starting to look for alternative therapies and alternative medicines and like all those sorts of things.
Hmm.
Um, you have to be open to that. And so I don't know that there's no reason, I was gonna say there's no reason for me to go through a spiritual awakening, but that's probably a dumb thing to say. You know what I mean? Because everybody probably should go through some sort of awakening. But yeah, for me, it hasn't, I guess it's been good to go through it with you kind of leading the way and showing me some things, as far as just different thought processes and, really the metaphysical aspect of it,
Yeah.
because I can barely say the word now, but I never knew that word, the metaphysical aspect of things.
Yeah.
And so it's been interesting to learn that and just kind of, be open to it and watch you go.
Yeah. It's been so nice to have you there. I appreciate so much, and maybe I took it for granted, our relationship and just the constant support that we give one another. And I never really, I mean, there were definitely times where I knew I was in a good spot and that I was so lucky to have you. But it's interesting, and I feel for couples that struggle with that, because if someone naturally has a skepticism that is more rigid and they really only want to believe what they can see and touch, it is more difficult to have a loved one go through a spiritual awakening and become open to all these things that really should be very natural to us. But we've kind of been turned away from the validity of them and allowing them become a part of our lives. So I think things like astrology, things like spirit communication, energy healing, all of those aspects of what are supposedly mysticism, I feel like are becoming more common now because people can't really deny them. Were there any experiences? I can't remember through the years, but I have to ask this question just because I've seen, with my own eyes, I've seen spirit before. I've woken up in the middle of the night. I've looked to the end of my bed and I have seen a spirit, one of my guides standing there. All of the hair was sticking up on my body. I was very cold, just like they talk about that experience.
Mhm.
Did you have any physical proof like that over the years?
No, I've never seen anything, you know.
What the orbs?
Well, I guess that's true. But I've not physically seen those, right?
Mm.
Those are really just through the camera.
Yeah, Steven has a really amazing gift of taking pictures, and within the pictures, there will be orbs set up
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. So that's really the only thing that I've ever had where I take the pictures and I see the orbs. And that's always been kind of fun to go back through and look at pictures that I've taken. I've never physically seen, a spirit. But there was, and I don't even remember what caused it. But remember the one time, it was we were at our house in Strongsville in our bedroom, and it was late at night, and we were talking about something, and I actually like thought of my grandmother, my dad's mom, and oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't my dad's mom. It was my mom's mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what it was, but I got chills down my back. And it was the first time that I got chills.
Mm.
And then we were talking about it a little bit more, and I got chills again. And I remember saying, like, I think my grandma's here with us. And that's when I got the chills. But I don't remember what we were talking about. I have a terrible memory.
Yeah.
And so do you remember what we were even talking
I
about?
really don't, but I remember that experience. And I
Yeah.
think that was just the first time you got chills. You get chills more
Now I get
now.
chills. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I get them down my back now. And that's the only place that I get chills,
Down your spine.
Yeah, down my spine. So it's so weird
Yeah.
to have that experience. But you've taught me, right, that you have to look for those sorts of things
Hmm.
because everybody has those moments
Yeah.
where something, where they might get the chills or like a sensation somewhere. And so I think everybody's got a little bit of that.
Yeah.
but they haven't gone through the spiritual awakening, or they're just not aware of it, or whatever the situation is,
Sure.
you know? So I've learned that from you.
Speaking about phenomena, I kind of want to talk about it for a little bit, just because we've had, I think your belief became stronger, not just because of me, but also because of the boys. So, them being raised in a home where anything went and they weren't told that anything was wrong or inaccurate. I mean, Salvatore used to come down. We used to have these really big Reiki shares in our house. Sometimes we'd have 20 people in the house. We'd have 4 or 5 beds set up, and we would do Reiki shares for a couple hours. I think that energy really opened up a little portal in the house. But we've had some interesting, and Sal used to come down and he would do healing and get healing and before everyone got there. So he was always kind of open to that. But let's talk a little bit about some of the experiences that the boys have had.
Sure.
And let's start with when we were in Cary,
Yeah.
that house.
And are you talking about when they were the fairies, like in the rose garden, or like in the rose bushes, or
Oh,
just
that
their
was cool.
intuitiveness, or
You could talk about the fairies. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, so and like just thinking of kids and how they are, they're so pure. They come into the world with, you know, little to no baggage, and so you always hear these stories of kids that can think of their past lives, and I think as we grow older, what ends up happening is you're a weirdo, if you start to talk like that. And so people, parents just get it out of the kids, stop talking like that, or they just don't pay attention. And then the kids grow up and they get around their friends, and, everything kind of starts to change. But, you've always encouraged those conversations and asked them questions. And they've come back to it though, like several times, where they're um, giving you the same answers. And so it's not like they're just making stuff up on the spot and then moving on, like, a week later, hey, let's go back to that. And so again, for me to see that, you know, there's just more validation to that on why going through a spiritual awakening is a really cool thing and an important thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thinking back to Carrie, like, just a couple of things that I was talking about was we used to have the roses. There were like a rose garden out in front of our house in the window. And I think it was you and Salvatore.
Yeah.
And you guys were actually watching an orb float around.
We have it on camera.
And we have it on camera.
I mean, it's probably a minute long.
Yeah.
And it's just a puffy little orb floating around in the camera.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because you couldn't see it when you were looking with your naked eye. Salvi saw it, but then we got the camera out and we could see it so clearly through the camera. And we followed that fairy around for over a minute.
Yeah.
That was a long time.
Yeah. So just seeing, like, having the kids, I think they're young, fun energy,
Yeah.
and you used to tell them that there were fairies that lived in the rose garden, or, the rose bushes and all that. And so, there's some mysticism there.
I saw a fairy one time actually floating in the house, and I followed it all the way from the living room into my office.
Yeah.
And I remember being on the phone with Scott and just couldn't believe my eyes and just floated. She just floated in there. North Carolina, we saw.
Yeah.
Fairies were sticking out.
Yeah.
During that time. Do you remember Salvatore waking up that morning when we were sitting on the couch? And you and I were sitting on the couch and we had a view to his bedroom door. And then he walked into the bathroom and turned the light on. And he said, "Oh, wow. Oh, I'm Sal. I'm Sal now. I forgot I was Sal."
Yeah. Yeah. Cause he did he think he's like an African American person, or I forget.
He did say, he looked over, he said, "I forgot I was Sal now. I used to be an African American woman."
Yeah.
And then he told us a little story about he used to be an African American. He had to go to the bathroom and we kind of let it go. I thought, oh, catch back up with him later. And later that day, him and his little buddy Aiden were on scooters. We used to just walk to the library. So I followed them on their scooters. And there he was telling Aiden, I used to be an African American woman when I was alive before. And it was just such a natural conversation. It was so sweet.
Yeah.
And he just had that little experience. Salvatore also used to have experiences. Do you remember when he was laying in bed talking to Gaetano? They must have been about maybe 4 and 6.
I don't.
He was telling him that they used to be in the military
Oh, yeah.
and they were in tankers, and that Gaetano was in a tanker and there was an explosion and they were just getting ready to fall asleep. So he was kind of just talking, and Gaetano was barely listening to him, but we were listening outside the door. And Salvatore said, there was an explosion, but that wasn't the one that killed you. And I was in the military at that time too, but I wasn't with you.
Yeah.
And then he just rolled over and went to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I think kids just have those experiences, and so they're just really open to that. So they would have all these stories, and then we would watch documentaries, or about other kids that would go through that.
Yeah.
And so had we not been in a relationship where you were open to that, and then we would watch documentaries on that, I would think that that was all crazy talk.
Yeah.
And so I think that just more speaks to our relationship of being open with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And more validation for me than to see, hey, not only is it your kids that are saying that stuff, but then there's all these other kids too, and then you hear these crazy stories of kids that, can recall dates and names and places. And so it's really not that far fetched, so when you're doing some of the things that you're doing, for me, it's, I can get from where we're at to that point, even though I can't do that because, I've had other validations to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just been easier.
It's been easier for me, but and then for, I was just kind of thinking about too, like the yin and the yang of it all, because, I think that's what makes our relationship so great is we do have a lot of things that we have in common,
Yeah.
but then also a lot of things that are different too. And, quite honestly, that gives us something to talk about, and I think you teach me a lot of things, um, that I would never study on my own, you know? So I think that's what helps this whole situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Sometimes I feel for people that want, because I've had this I've had clients also just assume they're going to have to get divorced.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They're just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Or they really want a spouse that is completely into all of the spiritual things that they are. And
Yeah.
I always caution them, because I think to myself, it has been so, and Reverend Connie used to say this. So my mediumship teacher used to say this. It's really good when you have a spouse that's so grounded, when you want to be in those upper chakras all of the time, navigating spirit world. It's really good, and it creates a really good balance. And I think because of her relationship, I always just felt validated. It never occurred to me that I would want to be with someone that was just as up there and out there as I've been.
Yeah.
It was always so good and calming and soothing that you were always so grounded and focused on the 3D world, and you could just hold that space for me. So I guess my heart goes out to them.
Yeah.
And I've definitely worked with a lot of couples in that way. And I feel like, and you and I have been with couples that have said things to us.
Well, I mean, thank God for Reverend Connie, to put that out there.
Yes.
Because she was such a great teacher, and obviously you had a lot of respect for her. And so for her to give like that advice, because you could have gone down that same path to say, hey, I'm changing, I'm going through this spiritual awakening. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you going through that? Or why aren't you going through it at the same pace that I am? Like, aren't we a team?
Yeah.
Where, you were able to see that we're a team in other ways.
Yeah.
And so I think that was, great advice. And
Yeah.
then also, just to be able to appreciate that, you know, we are different, and so I never really, I didn't mind you going to, church service on Wednesday nights and doing the healing and then going on Sundays and, you know, really starting to do all of those extra things. Just like you don't mind when, I watch a basketball game, and you have no interest in that and you don't care of the plays that I tell you about, you know what I mean? But there's still that just mutual respect of like, hey, this is what I enjoy, and I'm going to talk to you about it for a second, no
Yeah.
matter how much you don't care about, somebody's statistics. And not to say that, like I don't care about what you're going through. That's not what I mean.
And I care about what you're watching.
But
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like there's just
Yeah.
that, again, it's just something to talk about. And usually, I can, find something interesting to for you to say, oh wow, that is pretty cool, you know?
Yeah.
And so you learn about that. I mean, you've learned so much about basketball,
Yeah.
just like I've learned so much about, you know, metaphysics and spirituality and, things of that nature.
I think that is a definite necessity.
Yeah.
I mean, you were always so grounded. It always reminds me of this is this is our story in a totally different way. But I always remember Pretty Woman, Richard Gere, and Julia Roberts. And I remember her getting interviewed. And they were talking about how they worked together. And Richard Gere was getting ready to do the movie. And he was saying, I don't know why you need me. She is the star. And Julia Roberts saying, you're the rock. And I need you to be there so that I can dance around you and you'll keep me grounded. And I always remember that line in the movie. And I don't know if that's where I always just kind of went back to that. I don't know if I've ever told you that, but I've always thought about that. He is just that solid rock that I need that's so grounded and can hold space for us to be in this three-dimensional world.
Yeah.
And as I went up into the clouds and I would come back down and I'd go back up into the clouds in my practices and in my expansion of reality and just going into all those other zones, it was so nice to come home and look at you and come back down to earth and be able to take care of my children in a really conscious way. Because, I used to be able to meditate for 4 and 5 hours at a time.
Yeah.
And I really had to get out. And I used to meditate in the closet. So it was pitch black because I really loved the darkness and losing my senses and the way spirit could come through in that way when I did that.
Yeah.
And so I know sometimes I'd be up there for a really long time, especially if Scott came over to meditate with me.
Sure.
And you were always so patient.
Yeah.
And you would just knock on the door or the wall at the time.
Yeah.
You guys have been up for there for 3 hours, come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
In
then,
our closet.
and then you'd sit there and listen to us tell you all of the amazing things that would happen that must have just felt like storyland to you.
Yeah. I mean, definitely wild, but I think again, just thinking about marriage and like roles and you know for me, it's always just kind of going back to why do I love you, you know
Yeah.
and so I've always just wanted to support you and in any way that I can. And so even sitting in the closet, pushing all of our clothes to the one end and setting up the chairs and then, taping and trying, like you and I both being in the closet, trying to look for the light that's coming in and then, taping. And I don't know how much tape we've gone through in our lives together, more than the average couple, I'm sure. But like anything I can do to support that,
Yeah.
because I think that's what my role is. Just like, again, when I want to do something and you do everything you possibly can to support me. And so it goes back to, how much do I love this person,
Yeah.
more than anything,
Yeah.
and so I don't know. And not to say that like couples that are, you know, having a difficult time with any of this don't love each other as much.
For
But I think
sure.
sometimes what happens is, people have priorities on what they think is important, and they don't want to let any of that go because they think their priorities are more important. Or, there might be some ego involved, or, something,
Yeah.
maybe they don't feel good about something they're doing. And so, they're trying to keep that other person where they're at. Like, I really have no idea,
Well, and they might be
but
afraid that their loved one is going to go down a path that isn't good
yeah,
or pure. I mean, a lot of people would come to the church and they would, they would be a part of a religious affiliation and they would come and they would say, I would just die if anyone from my church knew I was here.
right, which is crazy.
But they couldn't stop being curious about life after death. And they wanted to either hear from their loved ones. Some of them had spouses that had passed, children that had passed, and they wanted some validation that they were okay. And the church provided that. There were some really good mediums there that could get really clear symbols that validated that for them. And it was sad that they had to feel that way, that they had to feel as though they were doing something wrong,
Yeah.
or that if their loved ones found out or friends found out, that they would look at them different and it would change their relationship.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that too has to do with like ego, what are they going to think of me? And so then it's like, well, who are you? Who do you think you are? Are you this person that can't go to a church like that because of whatever you think, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, yeah.
But so you got to let that go a little bit. I think sometimes people just don't want to let go of their ego,
Yeah.
and I know that we talk about this a lot as far as me, or letting go of the ego, and I try to not have an ego. And um so again, thinking back to how do I support you through this?
Hmm.
I don't care what anybody thinks of what you do,
Yeah.
good, bad, or indifferent. And so because I don't care, I'm able to just support you in however you want to do it.
Yeah.
And because ultimately I don't care what people think of me,
Yeah.
And I always say, like, unless you're paying my electric bill, which no one is, I don't give a shit what you think,
Yeah.
like it's up to me and you to figure this out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no turning back once you head down that path and you become open to all of those aspects of who we are that have access to that and that know that knowledge is real, then there's no turning back. So then eventually everyone always has to end up walking through the door of, I have to care, I have to let go of what people think of me. And I have to really just live in a way that is authentic.
Mhm.
And I have to find my community because my people are out there. And I think it's becoming more common now. And I also think, I mean, it's becoming more common and it's also becoming more difficult. So some people are having an easier time in some areas of the country and in some communities, and some people are having a harder time. They're really, I think I had to come to a point where I couldn't deny it anymore. But I also grew up seeing spirit my whole life. And so I had to just kind of deal with letting that in and recognizing those aspects of myself as being human and recognizing that some people don't want to go through the acknowledgement of that or continuing education in that field where I couldn't stop it.
Are you talking about like getting into spiritualism or
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, getting it. Well, and yeah, for me, it's so interesting to me that I have these big, deep experiences and then I can't stop. I have to follow the pathway. Like I wake up sometimes in the morning and I just get this download and I know I'm supposed to follow this path and go have this experience.
Yeah.
And so I get on Gaia or YouTube, or I start looking at a book, I poke around and I keep going until all the pieces come together. I get the message. And sometimes I move from there. It changes my whole week or my whole month or whatever. And then it amazes me that you, knowing that all of that is real and valid and true, don't have to have those experiences for you to feel connected.
Yeah. I'm living vicariously through you.
Well,
but but it, like even on those mornings, so you wake up at 4:30, unexpectedly. I'll wake up at 6, I'll come downstairs and you're like, here's all this information and I'm just trying to drink my coffee, like, oh man. But so then and there's so much information that you're giving me though. And so like I'm almost like I'm cheating because I'm getting the cliff notes of like these huge downloads, and you know what I mean? So I'm still getting the information, not as much as you,
yeah,
but it's still enough to like make me think about things and really kind of helps me shape my thought process too,
yeah,
but I'm open to that. Yeah. I'm not turning on, Sports Center in the morning or something. I don't know that I ever turn on Sports Center, but I'm just saying, like,
yeah,
I'm willing to listen. And then, I mean, because most of the time I toss the remote to you and say, what do you want to watch? And it's always something on Gaia. And it's usually, something that's I'll find interesting.
yeah.
And so, there's just so much out there to learn from,
Oh, yeah.
you
Gaia
know,
is such a wonderful place to go. And yes.
yeah, so it's good information.
Mhm.
It's I've never, and obviously we've watched things that are goofy, you know yeah, on YouTube or wherever,
Yeah.
where we kind of turn that off. But for the most part, like, it's just you've always, if you are going to grow, you're always growing and you're always changing. And so you just have to decide, I think, what you're going to, you know, what you're going to put in
Yeah.
to grow. I think that affects you.
Yeah. How do you stay so open?
Yeah. So I think part of it, goes back to the ego. And I wish I could remember the guy's name. It's Ryan something, but he wrote a book called Ego is the Enemy.
Mm,
And it's a really great book, but it does talk about like how if you put your ego in the way of things, you're never going to grow and change.
yeah.
And so I have very little ego. I know that I don't know everything. And I always joke that I'm a dumb guy. I don't know a lot. There's things that I do know a lot about, but there's so much more that I don't know anything about. And so, you know, I'm I'm always good for new information, you know, and and I've learned to trust my intuition on things when things don't seem right, and so that allows me to learn a little bit more about something, so I might get some information, I might not trust that, or I can't put the pieces together on how that makes sense, and so then I'll do a little research and come to my own conclusions.
Yeah.
But I think that's how I do that. Like that's how I stay open. I come to it from a point of I don't know everything, you know. And so again, I know that I'm rambling, but like when I think about um when and I know that I've said this to you before, but like there's when you can come to any sort of situation and you can come to it with, no, nope, that's not right. Or, I don't know, and so um I'm just trying to think of a good example of that.
Even just someone recently presenting flat earth.
Right. Right. I mean, I can totally say, no, that's so stupid. That's dumb.
Yeah.
But then I don't know. I can't prove that the earth is round, and I'm not saying that I'm a flat earther or anything like that,
But
but I'm not a rounder because I don't know. I, there's so much. information out there,
Yeah.
that it's like, you know, I,
That's how I feel.
and you can make fun of people for being a flat earther
Sure.
because that's not what the norm is. But then you listen to some of these arguments and it's like, well, God, that makes a lot of sense,
Mhm.
and then the globe theory and um a lot of that makes sense,
Yeah.
but it's like you have to be open to that. And for me, it makes life a little bit more fun too,
Yeah.
because it is an interesting thing to start to look into and then start to, figure out what's really going on. I don't
Yeah.
understand why they would say the world is round.
Sure. But that doesn't mean that they didn't.
Right.
So, I come to it like that too. Rarely am I just no out the gate.
Yeah.
And I probably learned that from you, just because there's been so much that I have thought was true. And I think part of the spiritual awakening is recognizing that there was a whole big chunk of reality that I just assumed because I didn't know any better was real. And then all of the sudden, a whole a whole other aspect of my reality became known to me. And it shifted what I thought I had already known. And it shifted my perception of myself. I began to know more of who I was because of that. And so I think assuming that anything is set in stone and is done and is for certain, I think we become cut off to aspects of who we are until there's solid evidence, which is hard in most areas of life.
Yeah.
I think we need to remain soft. And I think that that also presents a vulnerability that is really uncomfortable for humanity,
Yeah.
because that's when we're vulnerable, we can become hurt. And I think that's
People are afraid of that.
for sure.
Yeah. That they don't want to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier to just turn on the TV and have it tell you what to think, you know,
Check out.
and check out. Yeah. And really, like, not even like, just when I say like turning on the TV, it's like just watching the news, and not really learning anything. Or just going down the same path of the same sort of information all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas, I think you and I will definitely do a lot of, we'll watch kind of both sides of things, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Not to get back to the flat earth thing, but like watching videos on both of those,
Yeah.
you've got to, to kind of see what's crazy and what's not crazy, and on
Yeah.
both sides.
And I think really the only way you can resolve any of that is through intuitive development. And I think that that's where a lot of my desire to grow came. Wanting to resolve things within myself, my intuition began to grow. And once I really just stepped into trusting it all the way, I haven't had to. It's okay if there's question marks out there, because I think question marks keep the universe in communication with us because we're asking questions. It's always good to have a few questions circling around in your aura so that the universe is continuously communicating with you on a metaphysical level. When we're certain and we're determined that things are black and things are white, that doesn't give the universe a lot of connection to our aura to move us and change us. So symbols lessen.
Yeah.
I know when I'm going through a difficult time, I might end up finding myself in a place of just wanting to see things as black and white. And then it's harder to feel that communication with spirit and with the universe. So my symbols aren't as prevalent.
Yeah. So how do you like figure out your symbols?
How do I figure them out?
Yeah, yeah. Like, you talk about your symbols. Like,
It's,
when did you know that it was symbols?
I think from mediumship development classes, I think Reverend Connie she taught us psychic shorthand very well, and that your symbols mean something that's unique to you. Scott and I touched on this in the last
Oh,
podcast.
okay.
Um, and so I think through her teaching that, because you have spirit guides that help you to learn your symbols. And so spirit kind of takes notes. So sometimes when I notice a symbol, I'll tell spirit I got it.
Yeah.
And it's a really good thing. I teach people to do that in development class, because then that symbol, like my symbol for frog, will always mean sister
Yeah.
because of Reina being in Italy and having that experience. So that's very unique to me. I have a sister that's named Reina. That means frog in Italian.
Yeah.
When we were in Italy, the Italian people kept saying, why did your mom name you that? Your mom named you Frog.
Yeah.
So whenever I see a frog in a reading, it means
Sister.
sister. So I'll know someone's sister's coming through.
Yeah.
And that's a great solid symbol for sister. A lot of my symbols have been set, but a lot of my symbols also too kind of move with where I'm at in life or something that I've watched. It was really cute one time, right before I decided to start writing my book. I was thinking about writing a book, and I thought, this is such a really big endeavor. I'm going to have to put my practice on hold. And we were moving. So it was kind of like now or never. It was the right time. Do we move and I start up a new practice, or do we move and I start writing this book? And
And I was like, which one's going to make money? Probably.
yeah, more money. And so then I didn't know what to do, but I got this message while I was in the shower to turn on Golden Girls. And so I went downstairs and I turned on Golden Girls on Hulu. And sure enough, it was about an episode where Blanche decided to become an author.
Yeah.
She decided to become a writer. And I just laughed at spirit because I knew they were telling me to go watch Golden Girls. And I thought, I wonder what this is about. Kind of forgetting my question about whether
Yeah.
I should write or not.
I do remember when that happened.
Yeah.
That's funny. But you know, again, that's just you listening to your intuition. And
Yeah.
so had like because I remember you telling me that whole story.
Yeah.
And then I turned on Golden Girls and Blanche was going to be an author. And so had I not known that you were contemplating, you know, should I open up my practice or should I write a book?
Yeah.
Right. I would have been like, ah, you're kind of full of shit. But I knew that that was something you were contemplating,
Yeah.
you know, and then there was just, that was a validation. And so for me, then that's a validation of like, you know, you really do just have this process that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that makes me then pay attention to what's going on in my life. Like, can I put things together?
Yeah.
And sometimes I can, sometimes I don't. And you help me with that too.
Do you remember when you were getting ready to leave the job you were at before?
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah. A couple years ago, you were contemplating switching jobs.
Yeah.
And you didn't know, and your previous employer was saying, we'll give you more money, just stay.
Yeah. We'll make you a manager.
And you were saying, okay,
Yeah.
I think I'm going to do that. And then you went to bed one night and you
went
woke
to
up.
bed. Yeah. And went to bed and we were like, all right, we're staying.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you woke up with nope.
Absolutely not.
What happened?
And then 2 months later, after I was started my new job, 85% of my division that I was in got
At
laid
the
off.
previous job. Yep.
Yeah, got laid off. And so, you know,
what did spirit do? I can't remember. What do you remember?
I don't remember if it was like a dream or if like all I was just up all night or
you were saying it's my ego.
yeah.
You woke up and you said, my ego wants to stay.
Yes.
Because it was such a well-known company. It was such a
yeah.
And you decided not to.
Yeah. Again, I was putting my ego in the way and I just wasn't following, you know, my intuition.
Yeah.
You know, and so then, and I know like it's such a big thing to like leave a job. So having a rough night of sleep, you know, but I shouldn't have had a rough night of sleep because I made the decision, you know, and we were confident that this is definitely the way that we're going to go.
And spirit was nagging you all night.
Yeah.
I thought that was really beautiful. I do remember it being a difficult process for us to learn to trust it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, especially when it comes to like jobs and things of that nature, just because there's so much on the line with, the kids and the bills and all that sort of thing. It's hard to
Put all
just
your faith.
put your faith in that. Yeah.
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 But I think we finally learned the more we don't, the harder it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, I definitely talk to people who are in jobs that they don't love, you
Yeah.
know, and they would like to do other things. And so they struggle, sometimes financially, but a lot of times emotionally, and then their relationships are tough, and you know, um, so they're afraid. They're afraid to follow their intuition and like do something that they truly like doing. And I like my job,
Yeah.
I liked my job before, obviously, but just following the intuition, has served us well.
Do you have advice for people that aren't necessarily on the spiritual path as strongly, I don't know if that's the right word, as I am on how to do that?
On how to follow their intuition.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with just like you have to learn to believe in yourself, you know? Um, and so if if you feel like you're not in the right place, you're probably not in the right place, you know, but you have to be able to trust yourself and know that you can put yourself in a different position. And maybe it's doing the same kind of thing, but for a different company, but like just believing in yourself that you're going to be able to do it, and then just moving forward with that. Probably not the greatest bit
Yeah.
of advice, but like, it really does come down to, and a lot of times too, like even for me, I was in leadership roles, where, I was moving up in companies. As I was managing people, and then I was managing managers. And, now I'm just a sales guy, you know? And so a lot of people don't want to take that step back because what are you doing? Like you're supposed to continue to climb that ladder, but that's the ego that's really talking to you, telling you, to do that. Um, and, obviously just being in charge of myself, I've made more money than I ever have in any of the positions that I've ever had, but it's because I wanted to say, you know what, I do believe in myself. I
Yeah.
keep telling all these people to do these things. Um, I should just do them for myself.
Mhm.
And so that's what I've done. Yeah.
I want to change the subject a minute just to talk about something that always comes up in the spiritual community that I think you'd be really good at answering.
All right.
Because I used to struggle that being a spiritual person, counselor, healer, medium, anything that I've ever done, involving, because really, once I started becoming a counselor, my spiritual practice was in place.
Yeah.
But I used to feel that it was not okay to make money.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Like for you,
Yeah.
well, I I don't know. Like obviously it's important to make money, but
Mhm.
when you think about it too, like who's the most spiritual person that you know?
That I know personally.
No, no, that's just
Oh,
that you know of.
oh, well, Reverend Connie
Yeah.
is very spiritual. Deepak Chopra is very spiritual.
Okay. That's who I was more along, like famous people that are spiritual,
Okay.
So like Deepak Chopra.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that Tony Robbins, but like to an
Mm-mm.
extent, like he's
Yeah.
got like some sort of something where he's talking about,
Sure.
you know, probably not a great example,
I
but
think of people that like Carolyn Mays or people that are really connected to their intuition and their guidance, maybe channel, but don't realize they channel.
yeah,
I think of some of the professors at my school,
yeah,
Sophia University. I got my master's in transpersonal psychology. Those professors were all very spiritual.
yeah. So my
Yeah.
point is, I'm sure all of those professors make a great living.
Yeah. Make
Deepak
money.
Chopra makes a great living.
Yeah.
Like most of the people that are famous, that are spiritual, make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we look to them as these spiritual gurus, and somehow we make it okay for them to make money,
Yeah.
but not ourselves. And I think that's just really wild, you know?
Yeah.
So um for me, money is just an exchange of energy anyways. And so if you're going to put your heart and soul into something, I'm hoping that you're going to expect to get that money back
Yeah.
to do the things that you want to do, you know? And not everybody needs a lot of money,
Yeah.
but if you want to have a lot of money, you should be able to have a lot of money. Like I,
Yeah.
I just don't think that there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
And um I think that people place a lot of value on money. And I know that sounds weird, but like, they want to keep all the money. They want to get as much money as they can. And then like that's the end goal.
Yeah.
Whereas like, for me, I definitely want to have a lot of money, but I want to spend a lot of money, and we don't live in a big fancy house or anything, but like if we want to go do something, we just go do it. And because we've put in our time and effort. Um, and so, somebody who works as hard as you do, writing a book, trying to put together this podcast, all the counseling that you've done, but then like all of the volunteering and everything else that you've done as well, a lot of time and effort, like you should be rewarded for that. And so I don't think that there's anything wrong with being spiritual and having a lot of money too,
Yeah.
you know?
That was really a difficult shift that I had to go through. That was definitely frustrating. I think that was a challenge for us at times. Um, it was really hard to feel that it was okay. And I know a lot of spiritual people have that issue of making money. And I was so grateful that you really taught me that. And I know we taught each other a lot about
Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
but it was really nice to come to and I think running those intender circles, because I used to run those intender circles at the
Yeah.
house, and we would meet every month and I would watch people. I was never really manifesting money at those circles. I was working on other things, but I watched people. We had that one insurance guy. He was so inspiring to me. He said, ever since I've been coming here, every month I make more and more commission. I feel like I have to keep coming. And it was just so nice to watch him continue to do that. And I knew him and I would see him around in the community, and he was a great father and just a very loving person. And it really made me feel okay with money in a new way.
Yeah.
And I think through those experiences of just allowing money to come into my life, just like energy does, just like everything else does, that was definitely a new concept. I definitely grew up with um, more of a poverty mindset. And I know you did too.
Sure.
And that was just a big struggle for us in our marriage. But we didn't really fight about it. It was never something that caused tension enough to hurt us, but it was definitely a lot of lessons to learn.
It was tough to go through, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and it really was tough to learn about it. And probably if, I'm just guessing, but when we first started to have those conversations where we didn't have money, and you would say, well, it's this poverty mindset that you have, no fault of your own, but this is just, you know, where you grew up and your environment that you grew up in, and that's what this is. And I probably would have been like, you're crazy, like, how can you even say something like that?
Yeah.
You know? And that's where then I'm sure I was like that. Like, I don't really truly remember, but
Yeah.
just kind of knowing how I would have been, I'd have been like, there's no way, that I grew up with no money and now all of a sudden I don't have money now because of what happened when I was a little, didn't have money when I was a little kid. I'm sure that's but that's me starting from no,
Yeah.
no, that's no, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Whereas then you kind of switch that, like, well, maybe that is the reason why.
Yeah.
And let's explore that a little bit.
And
And
it
then,
was wonderful because with honoring your parents and all they went through to come over from Italy and become immigrants in this country and have nothing
Oh yeah.
and start from living in a garage
Right.
and showering at the YMCA where they worked. That was a huge sacrifice. And to them, I feel like they were just worried about surviving in a new country, learning the language, getting their children into good schools. You went to private school.
Yeah.
I love how you tell the story of your parents cleaning. They were kind of the janitors at the school to help pay your tuition.
Absolutely.
And you would go in the middle of the night sometimes and clean with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I would go clean, it was the CYC then, but the YMCA,
Mm-hmm.
during the summertime. I would help clean there, sometimes I'd clean after school.
Yeah.
Um, but so there's a lot of lessons and all of that. But, you know, my parents definitely had that blue collar, work hard attitude. And they made very little money. They were putting it all into me and my sister.
Yeah.
That's what was important to them. And so it's great now, they're retired and they have money saved up and, all of that. They're doing great. But that's their experience.
But then you had to get out of
To get out of that.
survival mode,
Right.
making it in a new country, having this, that you were ready to evolve into the next stage of your family's development.
Right.
So we had to really identify that was the energy that we were swimming in. And my parents didn't have an overwhelming amount of money either. I definitely grew up in hand-me-downs. My dad worked in a factory, but as time went on, I was still kind of carrying that poverty mindset too. And we really had to take a moment to honor what they had gone through because they came up for sure. They ended up doing a lot better than their parents did. I mean, it was a beautiful, wasn't like they weren't trying, but it was time for us to kind of take the baton from there. It was hard to say, we deserve to, participate in all the alternative healthcare we want and have our kids in the schools that they need to be in for their development. And
yeah. But I think a lot of that, like just so like growing out of that poverty mindset into kind of where we're at and having to switch that, people don't really think about that too much. They don't go back to what's their mindset. And so they get stuck in these situations. And so like I think about kids who grow up in wealthy households, right? That's just their standard of living. That's what they know. And so they are going to be successful because that's just kind of what they know. And I'm not saying that happens every time, but that's where like I think about like mindset of just kind of what's in your DNA and how you approach things. So if you're used to living, in a stable household, all the bills are paid, you've always got, you go out to dinner, you do vacations, that's just kind of your standard of life. And that's what you're more than likely going to do, right? You could fall off and you could be poor. Who knows? Vice versa, you're someone who grows up in a poor household, you don't have a lot, you're always worried about the bills. Then when you get older, that's kind of your mindset. I don't have a lot, you know, and you're just used to that now. You can change and get out of that and become wealthy. And so it just really depends. But like it's growing out of, if you grew up in that bad situation, and not to say that we're in a bad situation, but
for
just
sure.
financially,
Yeah.
like there was definitely, struggles. And so um it's just learning and just having those conversations, recognizing, but that was a new concept for me
Yeah.
when we went through that, where, I know that you would have said, hey, this is how you grew up. And I would have been like, you're crazy. But then learning about that, like, oh yeah, I guess that does make sense.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
program of the past.
It's the programming. Yeah. Yeah.
And we're programmable, and it's a good thing if you know how to use it to your benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowing your worth, you know,
Yeah.
and then, you got to look back too. Like, I did go to Catholic schools my whole life. And then I did go to college, and I didn't do the best in college, but I still went to college. I tried hard. like I definitely studied, I graduated. And so then it's like I'm putting forth all this effort. I should be able to make the money that I want to make, you know, just like you got your master's, you volunteer like crazy at the church, and you're putting forth, time and effort for these clients, and learning all these new things. You should get paid for that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I think sometimes it's hard because I don't feel this way now, but it's because it was so enjoyable. It's almost like my programming was work is hard and it's a struggle, and you have to work a lot to get ahead. And that was just normal.
Yeah.
So I think to get into the mindset of, I really just want to work part time, but make what I felt was a full time living. And I want to leave time in my work life for the research and the stuff that I really enjoy, following those little nuggets to the big, epiphanies. I love that process and that connection that I have with spirit. And that's a communication that I don't ever want to sacrifice or stop.
Yeah.
That was hard to allow that to be considered a part of my workday.
Yeah.
And even still, I wake up every morning and I give myself an hour to an hour and a half of exploration, whether it's journaling, whether it's watching something or reading something or digging around in my mind or just meditating.
Yeah.
It's something. And I love that connection because I feel like then I'm always connecting to all those other aspects of who I am. And that spirit connection stays strong. And that's probably one of the most important things in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know how to operate without it.
Yeah. But so then all that time and effort you put into that,
Yeah.
even though you're journaling or you're watching something, you should be rewarded for that.
Yeah.
Because you're putting time and effort into that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's okay to make money based off of your efforts, because that's part of the effort.
Yeah. It was hard every time I needed to go up in my my hourly charge. And I had friends charging twice as much as me.
Yeah.
And that was wow. And they were saying, you have to charge more. You are not charging enough. It was a real struggle for me to kind of get the hang of.
Yeah.
And to just accept and not that I don't give, because if someone needs my services and they can't afford it, I am so happy to support that.
Right.
And I always want to volunteer. So I don't ever want to close the door to that. That's a beautiful thing. We can just give, I think, a certain amount of hours and used to volunteer. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to be involved in the Boys and Girls Club. We were young. We didn't have kids.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
We were always giving. It's just an important part of being a fellow human.
Yeah.
And I think it keeps us humble and it keeps us in touch with people that don't have.
Yeah. Well, and I say givers get,
You
you've got to give, because if not, you're not going to get. And, that's what you need. Yeah.
I love that. So before we go, I want to ask you, what are you into? Like what?
I know. I'm waiting to hear this question.
Yeah. Well, because I'm kind of thinking about because you've gone through phases where you kind of get into like NLP for a while, or you're studying the ego for a while, or you're looking at conscious finances and different areas. Is there an area that you're excited to explore more of? Or is there something you're looking into now? I just kind of want to know what you're doing in your spare time.
What have I been doing up here all day?
Yeah, listening to.
No, it's I kind of bounce around a lot, like with just the different podcasts that I listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously, that I listen to Joe Rogan all the time, and the reason why I do, like, is because of just all the interesting guests that he has on.
Yeah,
I've learned so many different subjects, from just some of those folks that he has on. So yeah, but like, like I've really started to get into Jay Griff
Hmm.
and Aaron Abkey,
Yes.
just everything that they kind of talk about. And they definitely, are seeing the world, and teaching a lot of people, about the systems and the matrix and, all that kind of stuff. And I've certainly been into that for a while, but those are a couple of smart dudes
They bring the
that really
content.
break it
Yes.
down.
Yes.
And so a dumb guy like me is like, oh, that's what that means. So,
Yeah. They
so
make it simple to understand really difficult concepts.
yeah,
Their newest, the docu-series that they're doing together is called The Rabbit Hole.
yeah, yeah. So like that's, I'm really into that. Um, I mean, should I talk about all the podcasts that I listen to, or just like
Yeah.
I like
It's
for me,
interesting to hear what you're
yeah,
into.
I love Jimmy Dore. I think he's hilarious. He's got a funny take on things, and I like a lot of what he has to say. But for me, honestly, I've been really focused on work, and so I try to spend time learning about the products that I sell. And I know that's so boring and that has nothing to do with like the metaphysical mindset and all that sort of thing. But, you know, another thing that I always say is you can't sell what you don't know,
Yeah.
And so because I'm in a sales position, like I want to know everything that I'm selling and the products, and it can be very difficult,
Yeah.
And so I think that that's really part of the reason why I've been successful in
Yeah.
this role and other roles is because, I take the time to really continue to learn what it is that I'm doing. And I don't think that a lot of people do that, honestly. I think they just kind of trudge along. And so, so I'm really into that. And then also like anything that I can do to be a better person, And so I've been trying to, follow more people on Instagram that are doctors that talk about nutrition and, what you should be intaking and, just small little things to help with my concentration, with my sleep, with my energy, like all of those things.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm certainly not the picture of health. However, it's those small little steps that you can put towards something that are going to make the big difference in the end.
Yeah.
And so like that's kind of what I'm into. I mean, it's nothing really too exciting. However, um, it's my day to day.
It's a very grounded
Yeah.
lifestyle that you live.
Yeah.
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 But I think you get into some interesting things. I
Sometimes.
think it intrigues you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's me that's always I'm always really deep into some deep topics and I love to be challenged and I love to expand my awareness of what new people are doing in alternative medicine and education. I love to hear about what people are doing in education and how they view different aspects of the process, whether it's, intervention specialists or, working with children that have these learning differences. And I love that. So it's interesting how it all comes together at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we kind of meet and can talk. I mean, we have our kids, so we're always talking about them and what they need and what their experiences are and how they're getting along and navigating the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a huge portion of like what are we thinking about, how
Yeah.
do we approach these two kids?
Yeah.
What do we say to them? But yeah, so in addition to what I'm into, then I get to, I mean, I think you bring the interesting stuff of like deep thoughts and, getting into Egypt and like, like all of those
Mm.
things, is, that's really interesting to me. And
Yeah.
I think I mean, I think that's been pretty consistent in our lives, but, you know, I don't feel like I have a ton of extra free time. So,
Not
I
right
think
now.
those things fill it up
Yeah.
pretty good. Yeah.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation.
We're going to continue downstairs probably.
I'm sure we will. Is there anything else you want to say or
No, I do listen. You know how proud I am of you,
oh,
and I
thank
love
you.
you so much, and I do appreciate that you brought me on. I'm a little sad that I wasn't your first guest, but I can understand that it was Scott. I love him. No, I'm teasing, but no, I do appreciate you just having me on and asking me some questions. I probably should have asked you more questions, but
No, I think it was
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
I
Thanks.
think I'll answer a lot of questions in episodes to come. And, people can find more information about me if they really want it. But it's nice to have you on, and it's nice to hear what the other side of me, because we are so close.
Yeah.
So what the other side of me looks like and goes through and thinks about and wants.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people sometimes can't believe that you're so grounded and that it's such a balance of a relationship, that it's not two people in the clouds all day.
Yeah.
And so I love having you on and being able to show people just a regular couple doing life.
I love
And
that.
this is it. So thank you so much for being on. And I look forward to having you on again.
Thanks, Sheg. I
All
love
right.
you.
Love you too.